My son gave away the house my husband built with his bare hands, without even asking me. "It's better this way," he said, smiling like I should be grateful. I smiled back, but when they arrived to move in, they found something they never expected. Let me tell you what happened from the very beginning. You see, I'm not the type to scream or beg. I've lived long enough to know that the quietest voices often carry the most weight. People think they can take and take, especially from those who love them the most. But my late husband knew better, and before he died, he made sure I wouldn't be left powerless. They thought they were walking into a new home. What they stepped into was a reckoning wrapped in roses and old floorboards. This isn't just a story about property. It's about memory, loyalty, and what happens when a mother's love is mistaken for silence. They say that time has a way of softening the edges of pain. But I've learned that memories, especially the ones tied to a place, don't fade. They deepen. My name is Eleanor Briggs. I'm 66, and I've been a widow for nearly 9 years. My husband, Benjamin, passed peacefully on a chilly October morning, sitting on the front porch of our country house, cradling a cup of coffee in his favorite chair, the one with the carved armrests and the squeaky leg he never bothered to fix. He always said it gave the chair character. Now I call it his chair. No one else sits there, not even me. That little cabin out in Cedarwood isn't much to look at, not to strangers anyway. The paint is weathered. The garden's gone wild in places. There's a draft near the back window that whines in the winter. But to me, it's a cathedral. Every creak in the floorboards is a hymn. Every scent, lavender in the hallway, the faint smell of cedar in the closets, is a whisper from the past. Benjamin and I bought the place when Andrew, our only child, was 3. We had no savings, just a stubborn dream and a rusty pickup. Benjamin worked overtime at the paper mill. I taught piano lessons out of our tiny living room in town. Every dollar went toward that house. Weekends were sacred. We'd pack up Andrew, drive the hour to Cedarwood, and live like pioneers. Benjamin dug flower beds while I painted the kitchen walls yellow, the same shade as my grandmother's apron. We had no heat those first few winters, just a cast iron stove and layers of blankets. But we laughed. Oh, we laughed. Andrew would chase fireflies in the yard, muddy shoes and all, and Benjamin would lift him up onto his shoulders and march him back inside like a conquering explorer. That was our world. Simple, small, perfect. Even after Benjamin died, I couldn't stay away. I moved back to the cabin most weekends, sometimes longer. I'd sit on the porch swing, drinking coffee in silence, hearing his voice in the wind through the apple trees we planted our second spring. It was my way of being with him. My little rituals, the flower arranging, the garden tending, the endless dusting of the shelves he built, kept me grounded. Some people heal by moving on. I heal by staying close. Andrew used to visit more often back then. He'd bring Tina and the kids, Emma and Josh, and we'd have cookouts under the oak tree. The kids would run wild, Tina would scroll her phone on the porch, and Andrew and I would sneak glances at one another that said, "We did okay, huh?" But then things began to shift, slowly at first. Tina started complaining about the smell of the old cushions, about the lack of a dishwasher, about the dated decor. She always seemed in a hurry to leave, making excuses about school schedules or errands. Andrew followed her lead. At first, it was a few missed weekends. Then months went by. Holidays were relocated to their suburban house closer to town. My invitations were politely declined, always with an apology too smooth, too practiced. I tried not to take it personally. Life gets busy. People change. But deep down, I felt the frost creeping in. Phone calls got shorter. Texts went unanswered. When I asked Andrew if they'd come for Benjamin's birthday like we used to, he said, "Maybe next year, Mom. The kids have a tournament. Tina's got her parents coming over." Always something. Always someone else. One Sunday, I baked apple pie, Benjamin's favorite, and left it on the counter for them, hoping they'd drop by. They never came. I ate a slice alone at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me. The ticking of the wall clock was the only sound in the room. The next morning, I found a leaf on the floor near the fireplace. Dry, curled, like something forgotten by time. And that's how it felt, like I was becoming invisible, like the years I'd poured into building something beautiful, something lasting, were being gently brushed aside, covered by newer plans, louder voices. But I wasn't angry. Not then. Not yet. I just folded the quilt Benjamin used to nap under and placed it on the foot of the bed he built. I dusted the old bookshelf, polished the copper kettle, and swept the front steps, just like always. And as the silence thickened around me, I reminded myself, I still had the house. I still had the memories. No one could take that away, or so I thought. The call came on a Tuesday morning, just as I was trimming back the wild roses near the porch. Andrew's name lit up my phone, and for a brief second I felt a flutter of warmth. Maybe he missed me. Maybe he remembered that this week would have been his father's birthday. But as soon as I heard his voice, flat and brisk, that little hope curled up like the leaves at my feet. "Mom," he said, "are you free for lunch today? I want to talk about something important." Peterson's Cafe. That's where we met, our usual spot when he was still in high school, and we'd sneak in post-church for pancakes. He'd always ask for extra syrup. That morning, though, he didn't even order coffee, just sat across from me, fidgeting with his phone, eyes darting toward the window. I smiled at him. "So, is this about Thanksgiving? I was thinking of making your dad's stuffing recipe this year." He hesitated. "No, it's not that. It's about the cabin." A chill slid down my spine, but I kept smiling. "What about it?" He took a deep breath. "Tina's parents, they're having a hard time. Their lease ends next month. They've got nowhere to go, and with how expensive housing is these days, well, we were thinking the cabin would be perfect for them." I blinked. "You mean for a weekend visit?" "No, Mom," he said quickly, avoiding my eyes. "To live. Full-time. I mean, you're hardly there anymore. It just sits empty most of the time, and they really need a quiet place to retire." There it was, the twist in the air, the shift of gravity in the room. "I see," I said quietly. Andrew rushed to fill the silence. "It's not like we're kicking you out or anything. You still have the house in town, but it just makes sense. Tina's parents could really use the space, and honestly, you've got more than enough." I watched him for a moment, my grown son, this man I raised, this boy who once cried when his goldfish died, and now here he was, offering up my soul's sanctuary like an extra casserole dish. Most people, I imagine, would raise their voice, slam a hand on the table, demand respect. I did none of that. Instead, I nodded. "That sounds reasonable." His eyebrows shot up. "Really?" I smiled gently. "If you think it's best." His relief was immediate. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling hard like he'd dodged a bullet. "Wow. I wasn't sure how you'd take it. Tina thought you might be upset." "Oh?" I said softly. "Why would I be?" He laughed nervously. "Well, it's got a lot of history, I know, but you're being really gracious. I appreciate that." I sipped my tea slowly, not letting the tremble in my fingers show. Of course. The rest of the lunch was polite, shallow. We talked about the kids, the weather, traffic. He never asked how I felt, never mentioned Benjamin. He paid the check, gave me a quick hug, and walked off with the same briskness he'd arrived with. I sat alone for a while after he left, fingers wrapped around my lukewarm mug. Then I drove back to town. I didn't cry. Not yet. That evening, when the sky turned indigo and the wind picked up, I went into the bedroom and opened the closet. There, behind the winter coats and a box of old photographs, was a small safe Benjamin installed years ago. The combination was still the same, his birthday, backward. Inside were the usual things, insurance papers, our marriage certificate, a few letters tied in ribbon. But beneath them, wrapped in parchment and age, was a thick envelope. My hands were steady as I opened it. Benjamin's handwriting greeted me like an old friend. "Eleanor," it began, "if you're reading this, something's happened that I feared might one day come to pass. If the cabin is ever at risk, if you ever feel like someone's trying to take it from you, know this: you are not powerless." My breath caught in my throat. "I've done something to protect you," the letter continued, and to protect what we built. Behind the letter was a set of legal documents, trust forms, property clauses, a signature from our lawyer dated 10 years ago. I stared at the papers, heart pounding, the words swimming into focus. Benjamin hadn't just left me memories, he'd left me protection, and no one, not Andrew, not Tina, not anyone, was going to take that away. The next morning, I stood outside the law office of Harold Calhoun, staring up at the brass sign on the door. It hadn't changed in decades. Still slightly crooked, still polished every Monday morning by the same assistant who brought stale donuts to the front desk. Harold had been Benjamin's friend since college. The two of them had built everything from duck blinds to retirement plans together. If Benjamin had trusted him, I would too. I stepped inside, the smell of paper and old leather greeting me like an old song. The receptionist blinked in surprise. "Mrs. Briggs? Mr. Calhoun's in, but well, let me check." A few minutes later, Harold emerged, tall and slightly hunched, with a face like weathered oak and glasses perched at the tip of his nose. "Eleanor," he said softly, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" I held up the envelope. "I need your help. Benjamin left me this." His eyes darkened. "Come in." His office hadn't changed either. Same books, same dusty clock ticking behind his desk. I handed him the documents. He read silently, occasionally nodding, murmuring. Then he placed the papers down and looked up. "He was always 2 steps ahead," Harold said. You know that." I nodded. "But I didn't expect this." He tapped the trust documents with one long finger. What Benjamin did here, it's extraordinary. He set up a family trust, well-structured, airtight. This isn't just a will. It's a binding legal structure that designates the country house as part of a protected family asset. It cannot be sold, transferred, or occupied by anyone outside the bloodline, unless you, as trustee, grant special exception. And even then, it would require court review. I blinked. "So, Andrew? He can't give it away?" "No," Harold said. "Not legally. Not even with your consent, unless you go through the entire legal process, which includes notifying all named heirs, filing an exception petition, and proving extraordinary circumstances." "But I didn't know any of this. Benjamin never told me he'd filed it." Harold leaned back. "He did that on purpose. He wanted you to have the final say, but only if someone tried to take what he knew you'd never willingly give." I exhaled slowly, my heart pounding. "So, what now?" He smiled gently. "Now? Nothing. Not unless you want to act. You're under no obligation to do anything until someone tries to move in or claim the property. But if you feel the house is under threat, we can formally activate the trust protections. I can file letters, notify the parties, and secure the home legally. But again, that's your call." I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. Harold reached across the desk and covered them with his own. "Eleanor, this isn't about a house. Benjamin left you this because he knew one day someone might mistake your kindness for weakness. This is his way of reminding you that your voice still matters." The words hit something deep in my chest. A part of me wanted to jump into action, to call Andrew, to lay it all out. But another part, the quieter, colder one, whispered, "Not yet," because something had shifted in me since yesterday. The moment Andrew treated the house like a burden, something disposable, I realized I needed to stop hoping he'd remember. He wouldn't, at least not yet. But when he did, I would be ready. I stood, folded the documents back into the envelope, and gave Harold a small nod. "Thank you. I'll be in touch if I need to take the next step." He smiled. "You know where to find me." As I walked back to my car, the autumn wind tugged at my coat, scattering dry leaves across the sidewalk like memories in motion. I thought of Benjamin hammering nails into the porch, sweat dripping from his brow, pausing only to kiss my forehead. I thought of the apple trees, the smell of cinnamon from our first holiday pie, the sound of Andrew's laughter echoing through the yard. No, I wasn't ready to fight, but I wasn't surrendering either. I was waiting. And sometimes, the quietest moments carry the sharpest edge. A week passed in silence. Andrew didn't call, and I didn't expect him to. That's how our family communicated now, through the absence of words. But late Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Tina. "Mom, I heard from Andrew you're okay with my parents moving in. Thank you. They'd love to come take a look this Saturday, if that's all right." I read it twice. The phrasing struck me. Heard from Andrew. Not from me, not confirmed. Just assumed. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. "Saturday is fine. I'll be at the cabin around 10. Tell them to come by." If Tina expected a fight, she wouldn't get one. Instead, she'd get something else. Saturday morning arrived with a sharp chill in the air. I lit the fireplace in the cabin, swept the porch, and placed fresh sunflowers on the dining table. Benjamin always said a warm welcome confuses even the coldest hearts. At exactly 10:15, a silver SUV pulled up the gravel driveway. Jim and Carol stepped out, dressed like they were touring a retirement brochure. Matching windbreakers, neutral smiles, and polite expectation. "Eleanor," Carol sang as she approached, "it's so sweet of you to meet us out here. I know this must be hard." I nodded. "Not at all. Come in, have a look around." The tour was brief. Jim seemed more interested in measuring the living room wall than asking questions. Carol opened drawers in the kitchen like she already owned the place. When she saw the fireplace, her face lit up. "Oh, this will be lovely for the holidays," she said. "I'm already picturing our stockings along the mantel." She smiled as if expecting me to smile back. I didn't. "Would you like tea?" I asked instead. We sat for 10 minutes, them chatting about furniture layout and where Carol's sewing machine might go. I just listened, nodding occasionally. And then, as the clock struck 11, I stood and walked to the door. "Thank you both for coming," I said. "I'll be in touch soon." Carol blinked. "Oh, so we're good to move in next weekend?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'll be in touch." They left with forced cheer, murmuring goodbyes. I watched their SUV disappear down the road before locking the door behind me. Then I dialed. "Hi," I said. "This is Eleanor Briggs. I'd like to schedule a security installation for my property." That afternoon, a discreet team from a local firm arrived. No uniforms, no fanfare, just quiet efficiency. They changed every lock, front, back, side door, basement hatch, reinforced the window latches, installed a camera above the porch, one near the back garden, and motion sensors inside the main hallway. I approved every placement. "What should we do if someone tries to force entry?" the lead technician asked. "Alert the authorities," I said, "and please post signs. Clear, firm language. No confusion." By sunset, the cabin was still and silent again, but this time, it was watching. That evening, I sat alone in the rocking chair Benjamin built the year Andrew left for college. I wrapped myself in the quilt I'd stitched that same autumn and listened to the wind move through the apple trees. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was resolute. Let them believe what they wanted. That I was too old, too sentimental, too passive to stand my ground. Let them plan their furniture placement and stocking arrangements. Let them measure walls and imagine holidays. Because while they dreamed of taking what they thought was unused, I had set the boundary, legally, quietly, unshakably. The house was no longer just a memory, it was a fortress. And I was no longer just a grieving widow. I was the guardian of everything Benjamin and I had built, and I was not going to let it be erased. Saturday dawned bright and unseasonably warm, the kind of day that begged for picnics and open windows, but at the end of a quiet dirt road in Cedarwood, something else was unfolding. At precisely 9:04 a.m., a white moving truck rumbled its way up the gravel driveway of the Briggs cabin. Behind it, Tina's SUV followed, with Jim and Carol in the back seat and the kids playing games on a tablet. Their laughter spilled out before the car even came to a full stop. Inside the truck, two movers, hired by Tina the day before, jumped out and began opening the rear doors. Cardboard boxes labeled sewing room, guest linens, and Carol's dishes waited patiently in neat stacks. Tina stepped out with sunglasses perched on her head, clipboard in hand. She looked around the yard as if already inspecting her domain. "Okay," she said. "Let's get the couch out first. That'll go right where the old green one is. Jim, can you help the movers with the antique hutch?" Jim nodded, already halfway to the tailgate. Carol lingered by the garden, humming softly. Then Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mom, the door won't open." Tina turned. "What do you mean?" "I tried the key. It doesn't work." Tina frowned. "Maybe the lock is sticky." She walked to the porch, slipped the key into the knob and jiggled. Nothing. Another twist, another attempt. Still nothing. Then, as Jim approached with a box in hand, the door made a sharp beep, beep, beep. A shrill alarm exploded from inside the house, barking from hidden speakers. A female voice repeating, "Unauthorized entry detected. Property under surveillance." Everyone froze. The movers dropped the box. Carol let out a startled yelp. Tina's face flushed deep red. "What is this?" A moment later, a sheriff's cruiser turned onto the driveway, lights flashing but no sirens. 2 officers stepped out, calm, composed. One of them, Officer Lyle, recognized Tina immediately. "Good morning," he said, walking toward the porch. "We've had a report of a break-in attempt at this address. Mind telling me what's going on here?" "This is our property," Tina said quickly. "My husband's mother agreed we could move in." The officer glanced at his clipboard. "Are you Eleanor Briggs?" "No, I'm her daughter-in-law." He raised an eyebrow. "And the deed or proof of residency is in your name." "No, but we were told it was fine. She gave us permission." Officer Lyle turned to his partner, who handed him a folder. "I think this will clarify things," he said. Tina opened the folder, and her face went white. Inside was a formal declaration from the Briggs Family Trust, signed by Eleanor and authorized by attorney Harold Calhoun. It outlined the irrevocable nature of the trust protections, confirmed that the property was restricted to bloodline inheritance, and cited specific state statutes regarding unauthorized occupancy. "You see," Officer Lyle said gently, "this property is protected by a trust. You're not on the list of authorized occupants. Legally, this is considered trespassing." "But she said," Tina started. The officer raised a hand. "Verbal assumptions don't override legal documentation. I recommend you contact your husband and have him speak with Mrs. Briggs directly before making further arrangements." Jim muttered something under his breath. Carol stood stone still, hands shaking. Meanwhile, just beyond the line of trees, tucked behind the apple grove, Eleanor sat on a weathered bench, porcelain teacup in hand. She watched the scene unfold through the leaves. Every movement, every expression. Her posture was calm, her face unreadable. The wind lifted the hem of her shawl. She sipped her tea. No gloating, no drama, just quiet presence. The way Benjamin would have liked it. Back in the driveway, the movers had begun reloading the boxes, awkward and unsure. Tina argued with the officers in hushed tones, gesturing toward the house as if proximity alone could change the facts. Eleanor remained hidden, content not to be seen, because this moment wasn't about confrontation. It was about boundaries, about clarity, and about finally letting the house speak for itself. The phone rang at exactly 1:12 p.m. I was back at my house in town, peeling apples for a pie that no one had requested, my hands steady, but my breath slow. I let it ring twice before picking up. "Mom!" Andrew's voice snapped through the line, sharp and brimming with fury. "What the hell happened this morning?" I didn't say anything at first. I let the silence stretch long enough to let him hear his own breath. "You set us up," he continued. "Tina's parents were humiliated. The police showed up. The kids were crying. You made a scene out of nothing." Still, I stayed quiet. I moved another apple to the cutting board and began slicing. "Why would you do that?" he pressed. "You told me you were okay with it. You nodded at the cafe. You agreed." Finally, I spoke. "Son," I said softly, the words deliberate, the tone even. "Your father is not leaving that house to your wife's family. A long one, the kind that makes your ears ring with realization. You think this is about inheritance? He finally asked, voice lower now. About who gets what? That house was just sitting there. We were trying to solve a problem. No, I said, placing the knife down. You were trying to erase a life. The line went dead. I didn't call back. That evening, as twilight brushed the windows, the messages started. One from Emma, confused and asking why Grandma had an alarm on the cabin. Another from Tina, short and seething. You blindsided us. I hope you're proud. But it was the third message that made me stop stirring the filling. Andrew, we need to talk. Later that night, I learned from a neighbor that Tina had left the house that afternoon, bags in hand, and hadn't returned by nightfall. The storm was brewing, and not outside. Inside the silence of a marriage under pressure. Because when a plan crumbles, someone always has to take the blame. Tina, from what I heard, had turned on Andrew the moment they returned home. You said it was hers to give, she'd yelled. I trusted you, she'd cried. He tried to explain, but the paper in the officer's hands had spoken louder than any defense. Tina's parents were furious, humiliated in front of their grandchildren, movers, and law enforcement. And Tina, always one for optics, was reeling from the social fallout. Their house, once loud with children and routine, had gone quiet. The next afternoon, just as the sun dipped behind the trees, I heard a knock at my front door. A slow, uncertain knock, not the kind you give when you're confident. I opened it to find Andrew standing there. Not the Andrew who had stormed out of Peterson's cafe, not the Andrew who barked on the phone. This Andrew looked older than I remembered. Shoulders sagging, lips tight, eyes ringed with exhaustion. Hi, Mom, he said quietly. Can I come in? I stepped aside. He walked slowly, like someone unsure of his footing, and sat at the kitchen table, his hands clasped together so tightly his knuckles turned white. I messed up, he said. I didn't check, I didn't ask, I just assumed. I said nothing. Let him keep going. Tina wanted it to happen. Her parents needed somewhere to go, and I just wanted peace. I thought if I could give them this, things would be easier, but I never asked myself if it was right. He looked up at me, his eyes glossy. I forgot what that house meant, what it still means. A single tear escaped, but he didn't wipe it away. I didn't just try to give away your memories, Mom. I tried to give away Dad's legacy. I sat down across from him. You didn't forget, I said quietly. You ignored. There's a difference. He nodded, the words hitting harder than if I'd raised my voice. I'm sorry, he whispered. I really am. We sat in silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled, just held. Eventually I stood and poured us both tea. Not to forgive, not yet, but to open a door. Because sometimes the sound of a teacup on a saucer is louder than a slammed door. And sometimes the knock that brings a son home isn't the loudest one. It's the one that comes from within. Andrew stayed for a long time that night. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't expect comfort. He just stayed. We sat at the kitchen table, the tea growing cold between us. Outside, the wind tapped gently at the window pane, like it too was waiting for something. I should have come sooner, he said at last, eyes fixed on the tabletop, but I didn't know how to explain it. I said nothing, let the air between us do the holding. Tina didn't grow up like I did, he continued. Her family moved every year, sometimes more. Cheap rentals, no roots. Her dad lost a job when she was 7 and they were evicted. She tells that story like a joke, but it scarred her. He paused. That's why she wanted the cabin. It wasn't greed, it was fear. Fear her parents would be homeless in their old age. Fear she'd be the one to let it happen. I watched him speak. His voice was slow, stripped of its usual defenses. I didn't want a fighter. I wanted peace. So I told myself that the house, it was just a structure. Wood and nails. I told myself you'd understand. He looked up, and for a moment, I saw the boy he used to be. The one who hid behind me during thunderstorms. The one who cried when his goldfish died and swore he'd never love anything again because it hurt too much. I chose temporary calm, he said, over permanent respect, and now everything's falling apart. Still, I didn't speak. He shook his head. Tina's not talking to me. The kids are confused, and I keep hearing Dad's voice in my head, not angry, just disappointed. At that, I stood, walked to the small desk in the corner of the living room, the one Benjamin built with his own hands, opened the top drawer, pulled out a single sheet of folded paper, its edges worn with time. I placed it on the table. Andrew stared. "What's this?" "From your father," I said simply. "He wrote it the year before he died. Told me to give it to you if you ever forgot who you were." Andrew unfolded the letter slowly, reverently, like it might break in his hands. I didn't read over his shoulder, but I didn't have to. I knew every word. "Son," it began, "if you're reading this, it means life got louder than love for a while. That happens, but I need you to remember who raised you. Not just your mother, but the values we taught you in that little cabin under the cedar trees. If you've done something that hurt your mother, fix it. No pride, no delay, just fix it. Because someday, when your own children are grown, you'll want them to choose what's right, even when it's hard, and they'll only learn that by watching you. So, if you've forgotten, remember now. We are Briggs. We don't discard what's sacred. We don't trade memory for comfort. We protect what matters. And above all, we never, never let silence win." Andrew folded the letter back up with trembling hands. He didn't speak for a long time. When he did, it was a whisper. "I forgot, Dad." Then softer still, "I'm sorry, Mom." And still, I didn't answer. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his, and in that moment, words weren't needed. Because the letter had said everything. Andrew held the letter as though it might vanish if he blinked too hard. His eyes moved back to the final paragraph, lips forming each word silently, then freezing on a line I knew would stay with him forever. "If she ever shows you this letter, son, then it means the house is in danger, and so is the heart of this family. But don't panic. I planned for this." Andrew looked up, brows furrowed. "What does that mean?" I reached for the envelope the letter came in and pulled out a second folded page. One Benjamin had attached, but told me never to open unless I had to. I placed it on the table. Andrew opened it slowly. It wasn't poetic like the letter. It was pure Benjamin, concise, practical, strategic. A breakdown of an account number, maintenance allocations, notes on interest, a small fund saved steadily over the years. "Dad set aside money?" Andrew asked, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. He wanted the house to stay in the family, but more than that, he wanted it to be used, cared for. He didn't want it to rot in memory. He wanted new life in it. Andrew traced the numbers with his finger. "This is enough to fix the roof, replace the siding, maybe even upgrade the kitchen." "See, yes," I said. "It's enough to preserve what matters and modernize what helps it survive." The weight of realization settled over him. "He knew I might do this." "He didn't think less of you," I said. "He thought ahead. That's what fathers do." Andrew sat back in the chair. "Tina won't come around. Not after all this. Her parents won't even talk to me." I stirred my tea gently. "Then maybe it's time someone extended a hand." He looked at me. "I want to invite them," I said. "All of them. Tina, the children, her parents. For dinner. Here, no agendas. Just a table, a meal, and a chance to breathe." He blinked. "You want to?" "Yes, but after everything? We've all done damage," I said. "But families don't heal by staying apart. They heal by showing up, sharing bread, listening." Andrew leaned forward, elbows on the table, rubbing his face with both hands. "I don't even know what to say to them." "Then start by saying nothing. Let the evening speak for itself." There was a pause. "Do you think they'll come?" he asked. I smiled gently. "I think they'll come if you're the one who asks." That night, as I watched him walk to his car, clutching Benjamin's letter like a compass, I felt something shift, not back to the way things were, but towards something new, something earned. 2 days later, Andrew called. "They said yes," he said. "Carol even asked what she could bring." I told him not to worry. I had a plan. The following Sunday, I cooked all day. roast chicken, garlic potatoes, a peach cobbler just like Benjamin used to make. I dusted off the long table, polished the good silver, and set out cloth napkins I hadn't used in years. At 6 o'clock sharp, Tina's SUV pulled up. She stepped out first, nervous, guarded, but present. Behind her, Jim and Carol. No windbreakers this time, no boxes, just folded hands and wary eyes. The door opened, the air shifted, and the house, a house built by two hands and held by one heart, welcomed them home. The table had never looked so full, not just with food, but with tension, hope, and the awkward hush of people trying to find their way back to each other. Roast chicken sat golden and glistening at the center, flanked by mashed potatoes, green beans with garlic butter, and peach cobbler cooling on the sideboard. The silverware shone beneath the warm glow of the chandelier Benjamin hung 20 years ago, balancing on a ladder with paint still drying on his sleeves. Tina sat beside Andrew, hands folded in her lap, her expression unreadable. Across from them, Jim and Carol glanced around the room like newcomers in a museum of memories they were afraid to touch. The kids whispered to each other, unsure whether they were supposed to laugh or behave. I stood quietly, watching it all from the kitchen doorway for a moment longer, before stepping forward and placing the last bowl, cranberry relish, on the table. "Shall we?" I said, with a smile that was equal parts invitation and challenge. They nodded slowly. The clatter of serving spoons filled the silence, followed by the quiet rustle of napkins and plates. Halfway through the meal, conversation began to bloom. Small talk at first, weather, school, a neighbor's new dog. Nothing that required eye contact, nothing heavy. And then Jim cleared his throat. "I didn't know he built this place with his own hands," he said softly. I looked up. "He did," I said. "Every beam, every nail. He laid the floor in winter, hands cracked and bleeding, because we couldn't afford contractors. He said it would make the home warmer." Jim nodded, his lips pressed together. "He sounds like a good man," he said, voice cracking. "A man who took care of his family." "He was," I said simply. Jim's eyes filled with tears. He looked down, ashamed of the emotion, but didn't try to hide it. "I wish I'd met him," he whispered. And just like that, the air changed. The grief stopped being mine alone. Tina shifted in her seat. Her fork clinked against her plate as she set it down. "I need to say something," she said, her voice strained. "Eleanor, I'm sorry." She looked at me, eyes glassy, face flushed. "I pushed Andrew. I didn't ask you. I didn't think. I let my fear make decisions, and I forgot to respect your place in all this. You have every right to be angry." I didn't respond immediately. I wanted her to sit with the silence, to feel its weight. "I'm not angry," I said finally. "I was disappointed. That's harder." She nodded slowly. "I deserve that." The room went quiet again, until I stood and walked to the old cupboard near the fireplace. From the bottom drawer, wrapped in tissue paper yellowed with time, I pulled out a soft bundle. When I returned to the table, I set it in front of Tina, who looked puzzled. "What's this?" "Benjamin made that," I said, "before we were married. He took a weaving class to impress my father, thought it would show he could work with his hands." Everyone chuckled gently. "It's crooked," I added. "He never quite figured out how to keep the edges straight. Called it his ugly scarf. But I never let him throw it away." Tina touched the fabric, soft wool in muted earth tones, the edges indeed uneven, but the pattern warm and comforting. "He made it with intention," I said. "Even if it wasn't perfect." Tina looked up at me, eyes wide. "I want you to have it," I said, "not because everything's healed, but because you came tonight, because you stayed, because it's time we try." Her lip trembled. Carol reached for her hand, and around that table, where silence once sat between us, something began to thaw. Not quite peace, but the beginning of it. The next morning, the dishes from dinner still rested in the sink, the scent of peach cobbler lingering like a gentle echo in the air. I stood by the window with a cup of tea, watching frost gather on the porch railing. Andrew arrived around 10, hands in his pockets, guilt still in his eyes, but a different kind of guilt now. The kind that comes after truth, not avoidance. We were talking last night, he said, and Tina's parents, they don't know what to do next. The lease is up in 3 weeks. They've sold most of their furniture. It's a mess. I nodded slowly. I know. I don't want to ask for anything more, he said quickly. That house, this house, should stay yours forever. I turned and opened the drawer near the dining table, the one Benjamin and I used to keep spare receipts, measuring tape, little notes for each other. From inside, I pulled the trust file, Benjamin's foresight made tangible. I've reviewed it, I said. There's a clause allowing discretionary spending for repairs, renovations, or other family needs. Andrew blinked. You'd consider using it? Yes, I said. Not to give the house away. That's off the table. But to help your in-laws find their own place? A modest deposit? Maybe even cover moving costs? His mouth opened, then closed again. I want to protect this place, I continued, but I also want to protect what it represents. Family, dignity, forgiveness. He nodded, eyes wet. They'll be so relieved. In the weeks that followed, something shifted. Tina came by every Sunday with the kids, not out of obligation, not to take, just to be present. Carol brought me cinnamon muffins one morning, still warm in the tin, and asked, quietly, if she could help prune the rose bushes in spring. Even Jim showed up with paint samples one Saturday, pointing at the faded siding and offering to organize a small repair crew. I didn't stop them, because preserving a home wasn't just about keeping people out. It was also about letting the right people in. The country house began to change, not in spirit, but in care. We sanded the porch, restained the wood Benjamin once nailed with calloused fingers. The creaky screen door was replaced, a new banister installed on the stairs, though I insisted the old squeaky step remain. Its sound was part of the rhythm of the house. And then one afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the fireplace crackled softly, Tina approached me in the living room while the children played nearby. Eleanor, she said, hesitating just slightly, Emma's been asking about the scarf. I looked over. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, her fingers tangled in yarn, eyebrows furrowed in focus. She wants to learn how to make one, Tina added, and she asked if maybe you could teach her? I set my book down, walked to the old chest by the window, pulled out Benjamin's yarn basket, still filled with half-used spools, their colors faded, but their purpose whole. Then I sat beside Emma. Let me tell you about the first time your grandpa tried to make a scarf, I said, picking up a skein of wool the color of cedar bark. He thought it would impress me. Instead, he made the world's ugliest rectangle. Emma giggled. But he never gave up, I added. He kept trying until the crooked edges didn't matter anymore. I handed her the yarn, and as her small hands clumsily followed my guidance, loop by loop, I felt something invisible but powerful pass between us. Not property, not history, but a thread, binding past to present and memory to future. The first Sunday of April arrived with the scent of damp soil and blooming daffodils. The air still held a whisper of winter, but the sun pressed gently on our shoulders as if to remind us that warmth always returns, even after long, bitter seasons. We gathered beneath the old oak tree at the back of the property. It had stood there since before Benjamin and I moved in, wide-branched and patient. He used to say it was our sentinel, watching over the years like a quiet guardian. That morning, we laid out folding chairs in a semicircle around the base of the tree. Tina brought fresh flowers. Jim set up a small speaker for music. Carol passed out warm cider in thermoses, and Andrew carried something I hadn't expected to see again, Benjamin's old cedar box. We hadn't used it since the funeral. Inside were his favorite mementos, an old fishing license, our wedding photo, a page from the hardware store ledger where he'd jotted down porch measurements. But this time, there was something new. I'd like to read the letter again, Andrew said softly. The one Dad wrote. I nodded. He opened the box and pulled out the same folded paper he had once read through clenched teeth and tear-filled eyes. This time his voice was steady. He read every word aloud under the oak tree, where Benjamin once built a swing for Emma's father. He read not just for himself, but for all of us. We don't discard what's sacred. We don't trade memory for comfort. We protect what matters. Silence followed, but it wasn't heavy. It was reverent. Then Andrew turned to the rest of the family. Tina and I have something to share. Tina stood beside him, holding his hand. We've started a family trust, she said, for our home, for the kids, for whatever comes next. She smiled nervously at me. We use the exact structure Benjamin built, with Harold Calhoun's help. Andrew nodded. We want to protect what we're building the way he protected this place. We made some mistakes, but we've learned. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The look in my eyes must have said enough because Carol reached for my hand and I felt Jim squeeze my shoulder gently. Emma climbed onto the tree swing, her laughter ringing through the clearing, and I thought, this is what Benjamin wanted. Not just peace, but preservation. Not just forgiveness, but foundation. We didn't sing hymns that day. We didn't light candles or recite scripted prayers, but we honored him. In choices, in changed hearts, in the roots we planted deeper by the hour. By summer, the cottage had taken on a new rhythm, one not marked by silence or guarded steps, but by creation, laughter, and the soft, intentional movements of a life gently unfolding again. Eleanor stood at the town hall's community board, pinning up a flyer she had designed herself. It read, Art class, drawing what's nearly lost. Saturdays at 10 a.m., free for all ages. No formal training required, no experience necessary. Just bring a pencil and the willingness to see beauty in what others overlook. Her first class had 4 attendees, 2 children from the elementary school, a retired postman, and Carol. The second week, there were 10. By the third, they had to move from her living room to the garden patio. They drew old tools, forgotten keys, faded quilts, rusted bells. Eleanor brought a different object each week, something tucked away in attic corners or kitchen drawers, items most would have discarded. These things, she said one morning, holding up a chipped teacup, remind us that beauty isn't always shiny or new. Sometimes it's the curve of a crack, or the way a stain speaks of love poured 100 times. She never charged for her time. Instead, people began leaving tokens, jars of jam, homemade bread, letters tucked under flower pots. But her favorite offering came one afternoon when Emma, her granddaughter, arrived carrying a sketch of the country house porch. Porch swing, chipped paint and all. I want to hang this inside, Emma said, so everyone remembers where it all started. That's when the idea came. They called it the memory porch. A section of the house, just the front 2 rooms, would remain open to the public on weekends. Photos lined the walls, Benjamin's hands tying fishing lures, Eleanor in her wedding dress beneath the old oak tree, Andrew as a toddler covered in mud. People were invited to bring their own photos, stories, and small items to add to the space, a rotating museum of generational memory. They didn't just visit, they contributed. One woman left her father's Army medal. Another, a recipe book passed down from 3 grandmothers. A boy brought in a single chess piece his grandfather had carved during the war. The house, once nearly taken away, had become something more than a home. It was a place where memories didn't fade, where stories didn't disappear when the storyteller passed on, where even the forgotten found space to breathe again. And through it all, Eleanor remained at the center. Not as a gatekeeper, but as a guide. She walked the garden paths with school children, taught young mothers how to braid flowers into their daughters' hair, reminded tired men that softness was not weakness. She grew older, yes, but never quieter. One autumn evening, as the sun dipped low over the apple trees, she sat on the front steps, a shawl draped around her shoulders. Inside, Emma sat cross-legged, fingers carefully weaving yarn over a wooden loom. Wrap, pull, twist, she whispered, repeating the rhythm Eleanor had taught her. Eleanor watched through the window, smiling. Her breath fogged the glass slightly, but she didn't wipe it away. Instead, she closed her eyes and murmured softly, "To the wind, to the trees, to the love that still lived in every beam and nail. Benjamin, we're still living through the hands of the children." And somewhere through the hush of memory, it felt like he answered.